Hi everyone, welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in this Tuesday afternoon, and as we usually do, check in with Professor of Political Science Jennifer Lawless down at the University of Virginia. Jennifer, thank you for joining us today.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
Okay, big news coming out of D.C. District Court Judge Emmett Sullivan today, weighing in on former National Security Advisor, former Lieutenant in the U.S. Army, Lieutenant General, and of course Rhode Islander Mike Flynn, who Mueller had suggested in a sentencing memo not really get much, if any, jail time for his cooperation. But Judge Sullivan had a few stronger words today when the sentencing was postponed, called him selling out the country. What's the reaction been to D.C. District Court Judge Emmett Sullivan's remarks today?
Well, I think the best way to summarize the reaction is with his clarifying tweet, where he said, let me just make it clear that it's possible that Mike Flynn committed treason. I'm not saying that there's evidence to suggest that he has. So I think there was an immediate backlash because it seemed somewhat inappropriate, especially given that both sides had come to what looked like a pretty solid agreement regarding sentencing, for the judge to step in and suggest that if not that the sentence was inappropriate, that certainly Flynn's behavior required that he be held to higher account.
So interesting that he had to provide that clarifying tweet because he did not mince words today. Is, as you said, having to walk things back? Is there a little bit of chatter that perhaps his comments took things too far?
I think so, and I think there's also a general reluctance when players get involved in the Mueller investigation in a way that could look like they're out for blood, or there's a vendetta against the administration, or there's anything personal going on. And so I can imagine, and I think a lot of commentators have suggested as well, that this doesn't necessarily help Mueller's case because it suggests to the Trump administration anyway that everybody's out to get him. And it's these kinds of missteps and statements that are really not beneficial to anybody hoping that this investigation is going to come to a close and a report is going to be issued that might actually hold the administration accountable for some of its actions.
Have we heard any response from the president yet? Are we expecting a tweet or two, hopefully, at some point?
Oh, I can imagine there will definitely be tweets. I know that right before the sentencing, he tweeted his good luck wishes to Mike Flynn. So my sense is that within the next few hours, I don't know what he's doing right now, but as soon as he's free, I'm sure he'll take to Twitter once again.
Well, I don't know if you've noticed. I mean, we're here in Rhode Island. We do know, a lot of folks do know General Mike Flynn. A lot of his family members have been tweeting in his defense ever since this has taken place. So Trump has some ammunition up here as well. But let's talk about another judge. Let's go down to Texas. Let's talk about Reed O'Connor and striking down Obamacare.
This is a complicated set of circumstances because they're kind of not what we would expect. Basically, what happened is the judge struck down Obamacare as unconstitutional because the Republicans were able to strip from Obamacare the individual mandate. So by removing the penalty and saying that people don't have to pay a penalty if they don't get insurance, what this judge said was that Obamacare becomes unconstitutional because it no longer falls under Congress's power to tax. And so this is one of those strange circumstances where the Republicans got what they wanted both in the short run and probably the long run. And the Democrats under Nancy Pelosi have already stated that they plan to intervene as soon as they possibly can. And Barack Obama took to Facebook as well, telling people not to worry, that it'll work its way through the court system. But this is certainly not the news that Democrats need. And it's not the news that millions of Americans who are concerned about having health care that covers pre-existing conditions should feel good about either.
So immediately after this decision, GoLocal was the first here in the market to write about the potential implications for Rhode Island. Should states be concerned?
I think states should be concerned. Now, again, they shouldn't be concerned about tomorrow or next week or next month because the case does have to work its way through the court system. And there are also other ways for Congress to get involved, especially with the Democratic House, that could, possibly put the brakes on this. The other reason states probably have a little bit of leeway here is that Democrats and Republicans alike support pre-existing condition coverage. And that's the big thing that's going to be lost if Obamacare is struck down. So there are incentives on both sides of the aisle for this to be fixed. But it's certainly a headache that the people that supported repeal and replace and those that did not probably were not expecting and don't want to deal with right now.
So let's tack a little bit to some other news that just came out within the last 24 hours. The New York Attorney General looking into the Trump Foundation and finding that it was used for business and political purposes. Now, I believe the outcome of this is that the Trump Foundation has to wind down. Didn't seem to send as much shockwaves through the country as did these comments on Flynn this afternoon.
Well, I think because everybody knew that the Trump Foundation was working as an arm of Donald Trump's personal and political, aspirations as well. So, right from the beginning of the campaign, even before the campaign, there had been questions about the Trump Foundation. There had been questions about charitable giving, if anything actually existed. There were questions about nonprofit status. So this has been one of those things that over the last couple of years, I think everybody has reached consensus on and thought was inappropriate. This was just official notification that they were going to be winding down. And it was a big win for the New York Attorney General, but, I don't think it took anybody by surprise. The Flynn news took people by surprise because this was supposed to be a pretty, basic sentencing hearing.
Feels like something right out of the show Billions. But with the foundation winding down and having been found to be engaging in business and political activity, what's the repercussion besides a slap on the wrist and, say, shut down the shop?
It's unclear. I mean, there could be people that actually file individual civil lawsuits against the foundation, but by ceasing its activities, it inoculates itself against some of those things. I think more importantly is the fact that they're choosing to shut down the foundation when the foundation is only one piece of a much broader set of problems they have. So it's the foundation, it's the Trump organization, it's the Trump campaign, it's the Trump inauguration committee, it's the Trump transition team, it's the Trump White House. I can't even speak it. All of these pieces are sort of closing in around Donald Trump. And the fact that the family has basically said, all right, we'll get rid of the foundation, suggests that they see the dominoes falling and they're trying to clear their plates.
So I was terribly disappointed last week when you were out of the country and we weren't able to get you in after the big Oval Office powwow between Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, the president, and a very quiet Mike Pence. Now, of course, the politics of a showdown continue. And if you're a prognosticator, what do you envision?
So the thing that was really remarkable last week was that Donald Trump was goaded into saying, and then said with great glee and pleasure, that if there's a shutdown, he will happily take full responsibility. And so that puts the Democrats in a little bit of a tricky situation because obviously they don't want to shut down. It's bad for the country. It's bad for their constituents. But a shutdown where Trump has gone on record saying, look, it'll be all my fault, I'll take responsibility for it, is something that could be politically powerful for them moving forward. So I think the Democrats have the upper hand at this point, and we're already seeing the White House suggesting that, well, they can build this wall by taking pots of money from here and pots of money from there, even if it's not in the actual bill that would keep the government open. So it looks like the Democrats are probably going to have the upper hand, and that although Trump said he thought a shutdown would be completely reasonable and a plausible step forward, the Republicans are probably pushing against that.
They do seem to be walking back that hardline approach to the shutdown with the wall at the White House. But let's talk a little White House politics and looking at 2020. Of course, after the November elections, we had spoken before that it was too early to speculate who the Democrats were really looking at the next election cycle. But another week, another poll. Sanders is at the head of the progressive one in front of Warren. It's draft Beto O'Rourke. Is there anything surprising of this? And is the left side of the party run the risk of cannibalizing itself?
Of course, but everybody does in an election year where their party doesn't hold control of the White House. There are a couple of interesting things. First was the meeting between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, where if you believe both sides, they claim that they really just wanted to figure out who could be the better voice for progressives, and they don't want to run against each other. The irony there, of course, is that O'Rourke would be the voice of the progressives, and he wasn't at that meeting. So it's unclear that it's really a decision just for Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders to make. The other piece of news that came out, I think, yesterday was that Tulsi Gabbard, a member of Congress from Hawaii, has announced that she's forming an exploratory committee to run for president. And this just highlights the fact that there are going to be lots of people that are going to dip a toe into the water and see what it feels like. And focusing just on the people that have high name recognition at this point is what the polls are getting at, but it probably doesn't tell us much about what's going to happen 6 months from now or a year from now.
Speaking of looking ahead, as we're here on Tuesday afternoon, and hopefully we'll be catching up with you soon, but not next Tuesday. Tell us what you're going to be keeping an eye on as things may or may not quiet down inside the Beltway.
Well, I really think we are nearing an end with the Mueller investigation. We've gotten to the point where I think we're days or weeks away from another batch of indictments, whether they be Jared Kushner and Don Jr. or other high-profile campaign officials. But it's hard to see how the Michael Cohen news from last week, coupled with the fact that Flynn continues to be helpful to the special counsel, and that's in part why the sentencing was delayed, is not going to yield some pretty news-breaking and newsworthy indictments. So, I think this is not going to be a very Merry Christmas for the Trump family.
Well, we appreciate, as always, you're taking the time to Skype in. Likely not catching you next Tuesday, likely not the Tuesday after that either. So hopefully either we'll sneak you in or we'll catch you in 2019. Jennifer Lawless down at the University of Virginia, thank you for Skyping in today.
Of course. Have a good day.
Okay, thanks. Don't go anywhere. We're going to get a lot more local here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center, and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the 4 o'clock News and Politics Hour. We got a lot of politics from Jennifer Lawless at the University of Virginia. We're going to talk some news here in Rhode Island with Dr. Sam Zbutchkenbaum, the state dentist with the Rhode Island Department of Health. Thanks for coming back.
Hey, great to see you again, Kate.
Well, I appreciate your coming in on an important topic, one that you really want to bring to the attention of Rhode Islanders. As we are looking at the opioid epidemic and looking to address that here, you want to talk about the role of opioids in dentistry and how the Department of Health is looking at working with dentists, looking with Rhode Islanders at addressing opioid usage and how to best manage pain moving forward.
Exactly. Now, I don't know if I ever told you this, but about 30 years ago, I was a dentist at Capitol Hill Health Center, less than a mile and a half from here. And I will tell you, it was an area with significant dental need, but back in the day, if somebody needed a tooth extracted, it was automatic. You'd give them the gauze, you'd give them a prescription for antibiotics, you'd give them a prescription for opioids, and we know now that that may not have been in the patient's best interest. Maybe the gauze. We know now that antibiotics, because of our concern about antibiotic resistance, but we also know that opioids are actually not always the best choice for pain control. We've seen a couple of really interesting articles recently. One that showed that the use of Tylenol with Motrin gives actually just as good efficacy, almost better very, very frequently.
Now, that combination, Tylenol and Motrin, is this just a chemical combination for the average layperson?
Right, good question, great question. So the Ibuprofen, or is an NSAID, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, acts locally. It acts right at the area of inflammation.
Okay.
Then the Tylenol acts centrally, right up here. So and the opioids just act centrally. So this is helping in two areas, and it doesn't have the risk of abuse potential.
So talk a little bit about the role of the Department of Health in getting this information out to dentists. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know how many dentists there are in Rhode Island to really have this education campaign to say, hey, let's take a step back here, look at your prescription, look at your kind of what you've been up to, and here's another approach.
Right. So I think dentists are increasingly aware. They see articles in the Journal of the American Dental Association. We have educational events. But the other thing we want to do to help dentists is help them communicate effectively with patients. Many patients are coming into the dental office and they're expecting to get that opioid prescription, and when their dentist doesn't give it to them, the patient's like, hey, is there something wrong with me? No, the dentist knows they're actually doing better. So I brought this sheet along that I'm going to show you.
Okay.
This is based on a dentist by the name of Sarah Phillips. Dr. Sarah Phillips.
Local or national?
She was local. She was doing her 3 years stint with the National Health Service Corps in Newport at East Bay Community Action. She's originally from Texas. Unfortunately, she's left. She was wonderful. She showed me this sheet, and I'm going to have to explain it to the viewers. But what it does, it makes getting that combination of Tylenol and ibuprofen almost like a prescription, because it says, okay, take these tablets at this time, take these tablets at this time.
Oh, so this is very specific.
It's very specific.
They just don't send you home and said, take your Tylenol and Motrin together whenever you need it, but here's how the time release that you'll need.
Exactly. So we've posted this on our website, and we also had it in the Rhode Island Dental Association Journal so that dentists know to use this. And again, I'm really happy that you let me come on today, because I want patients out there, or people, or Rhode Islanders to know that if your dentist gives this to you, this shows they care.
And let's talk a little bit, anyone who's been to an emergency room in recent times, or even a dentist, any office where they ask on that pain scale. And if they say, how much pain are you in? One's a very little pain. Hopefully I'm not mixing up the levels, and 10 is excruciating.
Yeah.
Is there a point in time where a dentist might think, well, okay, there seems to be acute pain, I'm going to prescribe an opioid, or is this supposed to be the panacea for everything?
That's a great question. We do know that there are times that the dentist will assess the situation and realize that maybe this patient would benefit from an opioid, but I think they're going to give fewer now.
Okay.
Again, going back to my own history, now I'll tell you, as a 16-year-old, I remember I had my wisdom teeth out, and the oral surgeon gave me a very large vial. How many did I take? 1 or 2, right?
But you had a large vial.
What did I do with the rest? I put them on a shelf. Now, I could have done probably not great things with this. So anyway, so the other thing I wanted to share is that there was a recent paper in the Journal of the American Medical Association, and they followed insurance data on 19,000 people, 16 to 25-year-olds who had received a opioid prescription from a dental office.
Okay.
And they paired them with controls, 19,000 who had not.
Okay.
They followed both populations for 1 year, and they found that the group who had received the opioid prescription, over 5% of them had a physician visit for an opioid abuse-related disorder. So that tells us that 1 out of 20 are going on to have a potential problem. In the control group, it was less than 1%. So that was significant. So that's why it's really important to get this message out.
So I might take you out of your dentistry comfort zone for a second and ask you, and it might not be your jurisdiction, but if Tylenol and Motrin can help in the dental industry, can it be applicable to any other health areas as well?
Certainly, certainly. I think I've heard of cases of it being used in the emergency room when people are sewn up after an injury. I think that's where the physician or dentist is going to have to, give the patient that information, help them make that decision. If they do prescribe, maybe smaller amounts. But yeah, I think increasingly it's I know for me, if I've had problems, I've used that combination and it works. So.
Now, do you ever hear from dentists? Of course, they're oftentimes on the receiving end of those pharma reps who come on in and tell them that the drugs that they have, with all of this awareness of opioid and opioid abuse, we've also had on the flip side, we've had the folks who say, don't punish the pain for those who use opioids effectively. But do you think it's changed the dentist office from those folks who come in and say, here we have some opioids that might help your practice a little bit?
Yeah, I think patients are aware they're not expecting the opioids as frequently from the dental office. I think the patients also, again, the ones who maybe are looking for opioids, I think they're aware that the dentists check the PDMP, which is the monitoring program, and they look for potential concerns. So I think the information is out there. One thing, you mentioned emergency rooms. I can say that there are a significant number of people who present to the emergency rooms with dental pain. That number has actually gone down a little bit, which is great news, and we suspect that's because people know that emergency rooms are giving out opioids less and less.
Well, anything else you want to share while we have you here in the studio? Again, I appreciate this unique vantage point of the dentist vantage point of opioid use and how to address it. Anything else you want to share with folks?
Well, I guess I will say with the holidays here, I know people are going to get a lot of cookies, candies, and sweets. I'm going to confess that as a dentist, I do eat cookies, candies, and sweets, but I do brush and floss after. And I think it's also the amount of times, the amount of interactions with those sweets. If you limit it to just having it maybe once a day and not exposed all the day long, that's probably better for your teeth.
Is sugar really the biggest culprit with enamel destruction and wear?
Well, it's the bacteria. The bacteria consumes the sugars, converts it into acids. So it's the combination of the sugars with the bacteria.
Can you really explain that well to kids during the season too? Like, put that candy cane down just once a day.
I think they want the candy cane.
They might want the candy cane. But I really appreciate your taking the time to come in. We follow, obviously, opioid use and the state's role in combating it here. I appreciate your taking the time. Dr. Zam Swetchkenbaum, thank you so much.
Good to see you again.
And we're going to wrap up here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center because we're going to be heading over to the City Plan Commission where they are taking up a proposal to tear down a historic property on Blackstone Boulevard and subdivide it into 10 houses. So be sure to catch us when we pop back up with GoLocal Live at the City Plan Commission, probably around 5 o'clock. But of course, come back tomorrow here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center for Laura Afonso and all things food and drink at 3, and I'll be back with news and politics at 4. Catch us on GoLocalProv.com, see us on Facebook tonight, and we look forward to seeing you here tomorrow. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.